That ain't really that fella's arm, right? It's gotta be a dummy. Or a toy?
Well, I'm not cleaning it up.
Cleanup service request processed. Disposal of human arm from the Unreliable's cargo hold will commence in the immediate future.
Returning to the Outer Worlds was admittedly much easier this time around thanks to a better frame rate, quicker load times on PS5, and it may sound like that's a bit of a trivial thing to focus on, and maybe it is. The game did run fine for me on my PlayStation 4, and I didn't have any major technical issues, but the loading times could be at least 45 seconds long. I know because I timed it, and I had to because it felt like it was taking an eternity, and that may not seem like a long time in actuality, but for a game I felt like a 1 hour play session was more like a 30-minute session, and the other half hour was just me staring at loading screens. And while I am, of course, super popular and have my phone ringing at all times with cool gossip and tunes, usually when I am engaged in a game like The Outer Worlds, I try to make that one of my sole focuses, so taking me out of the game is a big no-no. Either way, I'm happy to report that the game runs way better now, and I think that's also due to a new update that ups the frame rate. Basically, the game runs better now than it did, and it made it easier to get back into. I was what felt like in the minority when it came to The Outer Worlds. I heard great things and was excited to try it. I'm reminded of my cousin telling me that The Boondock Saints was a great movie and one of his favorites. I was on a movie kick, so I turned it on one day, and to say I disliked it a great deal would be an understatement. I heard more people telling me about how good this movie was. I began to think, am I crazy? How is it possible other people I know and respect also love this movie and think it's fantastic? That's how The Outer Worlds was for me, but not exactly the same, because I did think the game was good overall, but there was just nothing memorable for me about it. The characters, story, and even the gameplay were all either good or okay, and nothing stood out to me beyond the sheer breadth of the choices and branching paths you can take in the story and quests, which is of course reason alone to give The Outer Worlds a shot if you're into that sort of thing. If you're not, may I suggest a more linear RPG like maybe Final Fantasy X. I am playing it for the first time now, and it's very, very good. It's linear, sure, but very good. So you could say, yes, I heard the good word that was The Outer Worlds, I played it and was very just unimpressed. It's not bad, it's good even, but is it great? I don't think so. Is it something I would definitely recommend to a passionate group of gamers who love RPGs? I would say for what you can get it for now, you can't be too disappointed. Get it on Game Pass or buy it on console for about half off at this rate, and the season pass being $24.99, I would argue the value alone, the game is not going to disappoint you. That being said, I stress it's a game I like, but not one that I fell in love with. I share that with you as a prerequisite to my thoughts on the 2 DLCs to The Outer Worlds, Peril and Gorgon and Murder on Eridanos. Considering my timing, and that you've likely moved on to other things or have already played the DLC and don't care what I think, I figured I would focus more on Murder on Eridanos and less on Gorgon, though I will get into both. Of course, before we continue, I urge you to subscribe to the channel and give me some support, because otherwise, well, I don't know. If not me, at least support your other YouTubers, big or small. We all need love. Okay, let's begin with Murder on Eridanos. Murder on Eridanos is kind of like if you see that your friend has some cool stuff and you wonder if you got your own cool stuff, would it still be cool? And it is. Suffice to say, Murder on Eridanos is surprising in a number of ways that I didn't even expect. I am an outspoken Outer Worlds skeptic in that I just don't really get the hype around this game. In comes the DLC, the second and final DLC, Murder on Eridanos, which launched last week and I finished it just last night. Dare I say and give away my thoughts right at the get-go, but I believe this DLC may have made me a believer. First things first, you're investigating the murder of one Halcyon Helen, a famous actress, or rather, famous character played by a famous actress. It doesn't matter. From that very first scene, I was drawn in way more to the story than I ever had been in the main game. And it really doesn't pad anything out. Murder on Eridanos may be a longer DLC and definitely has more quests than Gorgon did, but it never feels like it's padding anything out. And while there is a mystery and slow drip feed of information, it's pretty well paced, so nothing feels like it's being drawn out or dragged out for no reason whatsoever. There's that small tang of corporate shillness or corporate worship that starts here that's very Outer Worldsy. It starts with some of the characters in the beginning, but it quickly goes deeper, and it's clear that there's no real good guy or good side in the Outer Worlds. There's just the kind of okay side, the evil side with good intentions, and the cartoonishly evil side that may have good intentions deep down, but they're so blinded by their ambition that they can't see the harm that they're causing. Nobody fits that mold perfectly, not even your own character at times. Putting you in the role of an inspector, I was almost excited that another quest popped up with another lead to investigate. It felt very Outer Worldsy, if that makes sense. Like, it felt like it was leaning into the Outer Worlds' strengths. And even when it's leaning on tropes of investigative tales and serials, it's doing so tongue-in-cheek, so it avoids being cliche. Some of the dialogue choices are outright hysterical and have me stop for a second and laugh audibly at how ridiculous, in a good way of course, the choices were. I don't want to say more about the story other than to say I really enjoyed it overall. There's some abruptness to how it ends and even some missed opportunities in terms of the lack of payoff in some parts. A few of the characters are abruptly brought in, only to be tossed by the wayside once the story has used them for its purpose. So while I found the story engaging and fun, it is not without its faults. One thing I can say with certainty, and I will talk about it again later with the Gorgon DLC, is the way Obsidian still commits to giving you that agency over the story and accounts for you as the player doing wildly different things. Sometimes they offer simple one or the other choices, other times you can just straight up head down a different path in the story or quest. That continues here, and I'm constantly appreciative and amazed that they continue to give you those options and they care about offering the player choice. I've said before, there's not many games out there that for me are begging for replays or new playthroughs to experience different playstyles or even new content that I may have missed, especially considering a lot of games that have choices sometimes aren't offering a real choice and are more just handing you the colors of paint that they offer and are asking you which color you want, but it's still going to look the same at the end of the day. The Outer Worlds rejects that and will have you outright experience totally different quests with different goals. Murder on Eridanos has that, for example, and I had quests I knew I didn't do because of my choices and they weren't available for me. And that doesn't bother me one bit. I actually love that about the Outer Worlds, and I have no qualms about reloading an earlier save if I need to, just to see how the alternative quests pan out, because I really enjoyed the DLC story that much. I can't comment on the DLC without talking about the map or its design. It has arguably my favorite world design out of any of the planets or levels you can travel to. I know that's high praise, but there's a lot of variety across Eridanos, and it's actually kind of breathtaking just how massive the map actually is once you sit there and take it all in. Go over one hill and there's another. Travel to one section, go across another large ramp. Just don't look down, or don't jump. Seriously, definitely don't jump. It's one of the few moments I had with the Outer Worlds where I honestly wanted there to be more content and I wanted to explore more of Eridanos. Not larger per se, bigger is not always better. I know that's just a sick joke your girlfriend tells you to make you feel better because she loves you, but I mean that my main nitpick with the world is that there's not more to do in it despite the main quest of the DLC and some tasks and side quests. Though I guess it's better that it has less content at a higher quality than more that's just kind of okay. There's the same type of facilities and abandoned research labs you've grown to expect, but you don't spend too much time in them or much time at all running around them beyond a few of the quests. It's something I didn't like in the main game, how it would just put you in these scenarios constantly where it was almost begging you to get your fine ass back in that worn down facility overrun with parasites and vagrants. Get back in there, you stupid filth. Shake that inspector ass. I better see some twerking. What are we paying you for? Gunplay remains the same, obviously. The one thing I will say is that there was a stubborn lack of enemy variety in the main game, and that does continue here. Again, you're fighting very similar functioning enemies throughout most of the DLC, except some of these guys rush you as if they've had 10 cans of Bang Energy and only know the game Candy Crush. That's a very specific visual, and I hope you hold it near and dear to you. As I said also, you're an inspector, an investigator, investigating a murder, and you have a few tools at your disposal. One that is constantly funny and helpful, if a bit underutilized at times. I forgot the name, really, at this moment. It escapes me. But it does add a few fun new mechanics, one where you're investigating crime scenes and areas, and it even gives science, engineer, or medical-driven characters a chance to put their expertise to use, and it's something that is noticed by other characters, which I thought was really cool. Of course, I would also discuss the graphics and visuals, or even the sound, but it's unchanged from the main game. I can say that just aesthetically and from its presentation, it really does strike me as something special. Poetic even. I think this DLC, unless I am mistaken, has a little more cutscenes than in the main game, and they're not major, but it does lend some dramatic flair to the proceedings. But it is pretty eye-popping from a color standpoint also, and even the lighting does well to remind you that there is just something ever so slightly off. I didn't really notice anything interesting about the music, but I didn't really find much in the vanilla Outer Worlds that was interesting either. The voice cast does an excellent job of conveying the snarkiness, underhandedness, and even humanity of the characters. The best you can hope for, when you're not seeing the scenes of a story a character is describing is that they can explain it to you, to your character, and get you to believe it happened. Even though, spoiler alert, we know Obsidian didn't create that scene in the game engine, have the character experience it, and then the character's telling us about it. They won't. Nobody does. Suffice to say, much like in Reservoir Dogs, you don't see the heist in question in that movie. The characters in Murder on Eridanos are believable and have believable motives and stories. I will say this, if Murder on Eridanos is any indication of the quality, or at least the hint of quality we can expect from a potential sequel to The Outer Worlds, you can count me in. It's bright and clever and even hysterical in ways I didn't expect, and even some I did, but loved anyway. It also proved to me that the portrait mode dialogue system is kind of outdated in its presentation, and I could feel the game's age throughout, but thankfully Eridanos was compelling enough I was able to forgive it. It definitely left me with a better impression of The Outer Worlds than when I initially played it a while ago. So my humble recommendation is that this DLC is a reason alone to get the expansion pass. I liked it that much. Check it out, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Let's do Peril on Gorgon now. Peril on Gorgon was just more of the same from the main game for me. Depending on your enjoyment of it, you may have varying degrees of love or appreciation or hatred of it. Again, nothing about the plot or the side plots or the side quests, of which there are few, stood out. You're tasked with investigating the events on Gorgon, an asteroid with an abandoned factory, and of course, a research project gone totally wrong because, science. As far as the story goes, Peril on Gorgon does offer some lore and some intrigue, and that will no doubt be interesting to new and returning fans of the game, but as a story in and of itself, it's kind of mostly mundane and unexciting for the majority of it. Think getting excited as a kid for Christmas only to open up your presents and it's just clothes. Occasionally you get something you want, but also you get clothes. Mostly. It's kind of like if the main story to the main game was downsized and rewritten to be smaller and fit within a short and small string of quests. I don't say that to suggest that the DLC should have been bigger, or for $15 or $24.99 for the season pass that this wasn't worth the price of admission, more that it doesn't make a compelling argument that this is a brand new experience that you need to, experience. Sure, you fight slightly higher level enemies, you have an increased level cap and new environments to explore, but it also reuses some of the areas and even kind of tries to, again, as I said, mimic the stakes of the main story, but to a lesser degree. There was a lot of hate in the story there, but again, I just didn't feel very strongly about it. The best thing that I can say about Gorgon, and I said this about Murder on Eridanos, and I would even say this about the vanilla game, is its commitment to player choice, and not only giving you choice, but often making you go through multiple skill checks and various dialogue to get your desired outcome. It has that, and even goes further by having usually even more options that you didn't even think were possible. It's a testament to how Obsidian handles choices, that you can just kind of be the guy who doesn't give a shit about anything, or rather just kill everyone who looks at him or her or them funny. There are some smaller choices to make in other parts of the main quests and side quests and tasks. For example, one instance in particular where a crew is looking for some sacred llama of sorts. It doesn't add much to the story, but more to the flavor of the world, and that's just fine too, I guess. Don't really want to comment on the gameplay more than I have previously, but it's more competent than some of the older Fallout games, but again, it's not super remarkable. There are higher level weapons to get and enemies to fight, nothing crazy. Most of your time is spent on the Gorgon asteroid, but you will need to head to other locations, some from the main game. Gorgon itself doesn't feel any different or more deadly than any other area of the game, despite its reputation as being so deadly. I don't know if that's because in comparison to something like Eridanos, it just feels very compact and small. I go back and forth wanting more expansive areas, but also wanting there to be just more with what there is. You spend a lot of your time bobbing and weaving through the asteroid and its facilities, and again, depending on your level of enjoyment with the main game, this is much of the same. Peril on Gorgon felt kind of like a quick summary of what The Outer Worlds was for me overall. A game that is well made and good even, but one that doesn't do anything particularly great or even memorable. There's nothing offensively bad about it, but nothing strikingly good, at least for me. Though I do have to commend the talent on the voice cast for doing a great job of portraying the various sides of the conflict here. Now, don't get me wrong, not much happens. Literally, not much happens in this story, and there's not even that many characters you need to interact with, but what is there is helped along by some good talent with a good voice cast. Peril on Gorgon left me an Outer Worlds skeptic, very much in the same place that I started, indifferent. It wasn't this DLC's job to change that, but it was just a constant reminder that I wasn't in love with the main game, so I kind of am happy that the second DLC was much more significant and even impactful. With these expansions out of the way, I have to say, I think despite my issues with The Outer Worlds, I did come out of it enjoying it way more than I had anticipated I would. Still not in love with it, but I did like it enough to where I don't feel like I wasted my time playing it. I felt Peril and Gorgon was more of the same, kind of like a microcosm of the main game, just with less steps and less questing, but I definitely think Murder on Eridanos is enough alone to warrant buying the expansion pass. And look, if you're worried about taking the chance on the game, there is a considerable amount of affordable ways you can find and enjoy this game. But of course, I now throw out the discussion to you. Let me know what you think down below. Am I right about the Outer Worlds? Peril and Gorgon? Murder on Eridanos? Should I try some Spectrum Brown? No? Okay, fine. Finally, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If not, hit it with the thumbs down. Not gonna be mad if you give me what I deserve. Speaking of what I deserve, if you think I deserve another subscriber, consider being that one subscriber. It helps me make more content like this, or you can pressure me to make better content. A win-win, right? Either way, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.